Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda and I am a neurodivergent woman. I have autism, ADHD, aphantasia, which is the inability to experience senses in my mind, and a rare memory disorder called SDAM. I talk about all of these on my channel. Today I kind of want to talk a little bit just again about my autism journey. So a lot of women or assigned female at birth people have been just undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And so we're also kind of being considered the lost generation of autistics. So back, in the 80s and 90s, they were only doing research, and diagnosing white boys was primarily the case, except for sometimes rare, um, you know, there were, I'm not saying like no woman ever got diagnosed with autism in the 80s and 90s, but it was just not very common. And there's questions whether or not an early diagnosis, I don't know. It's kind of like you can't go back, right? Maybe if more of us had been diagnosed, the conversation would have changed sooner. One would like to have thought. But for those that were diagnosed early in the 80s and 90s, they often got put in ABA, which is applied behavioral. Hold on, let me look that up. Applied behavior analysis, which is basically like torture for autistic people. So the women that I have seen talking about it on TikTok who did get an early diagnosis, most of them are still also processing a ton of trauma from just a different perspective. And I cannot believe that there's still ABA going on today. I joined a local autism mom support group because my teens are also autistic. So I'm an autistic mom with autistic teens. And just like every couple of weeks, I see a mom asking for a recommendation for a local ABA place. And it's just like so cringy. I'm like, you need to listen to autistic voices. Applied behavioral analysis is just not the direction we need to be going for autism. What it basically means is that when an autistic person is doing a desired behavior, you give them a reward, often letting them do their special interest, which should never be used as a reward. And if they're doing a behavior that is undesirable to a neurotypical society, they get punishment. Back in the day, it was actually electric shock. Nowadays, I'm pretty sure the electric shock has been outlawed. At least I definitely hope so. But it could be taking away their special interest. It could be taking away a comfort food. It's a negative thing to try to get the autistic person to behave in the way that the society wants us to present. Okay, I don't even know how I got out on this train of thought. I'm also ADHD, so sometimes my tangents just take me places, and I've just learned to go with them because that's just part of who I am. And that's, again, part of ABA. It's like my brain works this way. My brain works on tangents, and it's just how I process and think, and trying to make it not do what it wants to do is just gonna make it even more difficult for me. The thing is, neurodivergent brains are just fundamentally different, and trying to make them the same as a neurotypical brain is not going to lead success for anyone. Now, that being said, the society as it is right now is set up for neurotypical brains. So we do need to function in society at large. And this is where advocacy and awareness work take place, because the more people are aware of what autism and ADHD look like, and other disabilities too, then the more we can then advocate for a change to bring the equity level up so that everybody is in society and not at the risk of being othered, not at the risk of suffering from mental health problems, of not fitting in and not being able to function in the society that is set up the way it is. The reason why there's such a high percentage of depression and anxiety in autistic people is not because autism and equals depression and anxiety. It's because when an autistic person is constantly trying to fit into a society that does not want them or does not understand how their brains work, it causes depression and anxiety. So if we could remove the things that cause our anxiety and depression, we can be autistic without the mental health issues. An example of this is a teacher wrote in on an autism board that I'm in, and he said, or she said, that there was this autistic student who kept repeating words that other students were saying, and it was annoying the other students. And then when it was brought to the autistic students' attention, they would just giggle. So the neurotypical teacher interpreted the situation that the autistic student was being annoying on purpose. Well, one autistic trait is called echolalia. I think I'm saying that right. And what happens is our brains often will repeat a sound and it will come out verbally that we hear. Like almost every single time my cat meows, only one of them, I've got 2 cats. When one of my cats meows, I have to repeat that meow. If I don't say it out loud, I'm saying it in my head. Sometimes I have control to say it only in my head. Other times it does come out. But the answers that this teacher got on this autistic board was like, hey, you need to reframe it. This kid isn't giggling because they are trying to be annoying. They are giggling probably because they feel ashamed of being outed and othered for a trait that they probably can't control. So they are not echoing the other students to be annoying on purpose. It is just how their autistic brain works. If you have a child that you are really struggling to communicate with, because right now our society is the way it is, there's no point in like pretending it isn't, and functioning in the society is an important goal. So right now, like my son is in OT, which is occupational therapy. It's all child-led. So we set goals up with my team and we say, hey, what is it you would like to work on this week? And he sets goals for himself. And the reason why my daughter isn't currently in OT is because right now she is not in a place where she wants to work on any goals. And or she's been able to set her own goals without the need of a therapist. We have talked about some goals that she is considering going to OT for to get a little outside help. But because it is child-led, she doesn't want to right now. We're not forcing her. ABA is all about force. OT is about, hey, what are goals that you want for yourself? Let's try to get you to those goals. So like some of the goals that my son has set for himself is learning to order and pay for himself at a fast food restaurant, talking to a librarian about getting a specific book off the shelf, just because the social anxiety is very high, walking to a nearby store on his own. So these are some goals that he right now is working on trying to get to be more comfortable with, because he has the goal of eventually becoming an independent person. I was just calculating that I got my diagnosis 4 months ago, and it's just really hard to believe. Part of my ADHD is time blindness, plus the fact that I have a memory disorder. So the fact that I have only been diagnosed autistic for 4 months is really mind-boggling to me, because I've learned and processed so much in those 4 months. So everybody journey is going to be a little bit different. When some people are self-diagnosed, and it might take them 6 months to a year, maybe even longer, before they feel comfortable and confident to declare themselves as self-diagnosed autistic. Some people sit with a self-diagnosis for a year or two, and then they decide that they would like to go ahead and get a formal diagnosis. Some people never get a formal diagnosis. And for me, my diagnosis process actually went way quicker than an average of or anybody else that I have talked to. I was working on, and I'm not saying nobody else has had it, just personally, I haven't talked to anybody. I was working on getting my kids diagnosed, and we actually got them diagnosed fairly quickly too at age 14. And while I was researching and finding out if autism was the correct diagnosis for them, I'm like, oh, these are really like traits that look similar to what I've experienced. And then the psychiatrist had an opening. I signed up, and I was diagnosed within a month of my kids getting diagnosis. So mine went really quickly. There's some people who have to process the fact that they are autistic. Well, let me take that back. We all have to process the fact that we are autistic. It just answers so many questions that we had as kids growing up. We always have felt different and not included, Watson, in some form or fashion. And having the answer of autism just is life changing, right? Like to be able to know that the reason for our quirkiness and sometimes obsessive thoughts, or like, I want to know everything about a new situation. And a lot of people would tell me, like, you'll just figure it out as you go. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I need to know everything. And that's always been something that people would make fun of me or just not give me the information I need because they didn't understand how badly my brain needed it to, again, not feel stress, not get anxious around a new situation. And I'm still going to be anxious from a new situation, but having as much information about it as possible really helps. So, again, for my diagnosis, it went really quickly, but for me, I've always been a disability advocate. I've always felt close to the disability community at large. So I think because I've always just felt kind of like an outsider looking in, and I just related so much to disabled people. So for me, getting a formal diagnosis really wasn't a big deal in the fact that, okay, now I'm part of the disabled community. For a lot of people, they have to work through internalized ableism in that manner. And I'm not saying I'm immune to internalized ableism. I actually thought that I was pretty good. Like I had that handled, but it's popped up. It's just part of our culture, and it's something that I'm working on too. But in these 4 months, I have gone through so many spaces, especially, getting diagnosed myself and my kids getting diagnosed at the same time. It's processing on such a huge level. I've gone through days of like just extremely low executive functioning where I felt like I could hardly even talk. I was so exhausted, hard to do anything. This last week, I have felt there was some anxiety this last week. We had IEP testing for my kids, and that spiked the stress level up in my household. But overall, I felt a lot more balanced, and it's just interesting. I've gone through. So, okay, what I'm trying to say. So I've had a higher level of executive functioning because my stress has been lower. So being able to manage the anxiety and stress that comes along in a society that isn't set up for autistic people, um, by stimming and using fidgets when I need, by um, like moving my body when I'm feeling stressed, um, by taking quiet moments to just do nothing. All of these things have helped me regulate. And so I've had several days where I've been able to do so much more. And it's interesting because I don't want to, every day is a new day. Like, there was one day I got so much done and I was so excited, and then the next day I just crashed. And it's like, oh, but it was so good yesterday. And you just can't compare. You gotta, hi Watson, you gotta take each day newly and try to find out what your triggers are. Try to keep analyzing, processing, record. I've been trying to take notes, trying to figure out what things have caused triggers for more stress, and to figure out if there's things that I could do to mitigate that. So, I'm still on the journey. I don't know. I've talked to some other people. Some people say it takes them a year or two before they just really feel settled into their diagnosis. Some people said that they got diagnosed 5 years ago and they're still learning and adapting to a new view of themselves. Some of these women were diagnosed even later than I was at 42. I think age and when you get diagnosed does make a big difference in how long it takes to process and adapt to the diagnosis afterwards. But yeah, I'm just continuing to unmask. I've used to be a person who was go, 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 constantly trying to meet up with friends to do things. But I'm finding nowadays I really like just being at home more, and I enjoy my friends. I'm a very social person, but I'm finding that I need more quiet downtime. And so, just exploring and continuing to figure out who the new me is. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you soon.